Aloha mai kākou from Waimea on the island of Hawaii. You're listening to the Hawai'i Radio Hour. I'm Mileka Lincoln, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Naka Nathaniel.
Aloha mai kākou.
On today's show, we'll share a story about a pilot's daring attempt to deliver supplies to Lahaina just days after the fires.
And we will discuss the tsunami warning and the need for trusted information in moments of crisis.
And we'll hear mele about the Manu o Ku from Amy Hānaiali'i.
And we will finish with a mo'olelo, a story from Gilian Santiago.
News, ʻike, kūpuna, mele, mo'olelo, and more.
All on today's episode of the Hawai'i Radio Hour from Kahilu.
But first, the news.
Aloha from Nani Waimea. I'm Naka Nathaniel. I'm here with my co-host, Mileka Lincoln.
We're so glad to have you listening to us today. We hope you're doing well this Sunday afternoon.
And if it's Sunday, that means, and you may need to check me on this, tomorrow is Monday?
Yeah. Most of the time.
Yeah, and that means that the first day of school for many is tomorrow.
Wow, this summer just completely whipped by. Blink and you would have missed it.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy to think that, all this summer fun is suddenly coming to an end.
Yes.
What do you remember about the first day of school?
Oh, my favorite part about the first day of school was always picking out my outfit, which was usually weeks in the making. So much consideration, just deliberation, back and forth. And then I pretty much always changed it the morning up. I was like, wait a second. This was not the vibe I was going for. But yes, I mean, that's the fun of back to school is people have gotten taller, people have gotten smarter, people have gotten tanner a lot of the time, and you get to reconnect with your friends. And also for me, instructors and teachers and educators, and everyone's really excited to be there with their brand new pencils and backpacks and shoes, and everything looks new and good for a day.
And then?
Nope. That's it. That's all you got. One
There
day.
comes the dirt.
Yep.
Well, my favorite thing about going back to school was always taking the photos right next to the front door, holding on to the sign saying what grade you were in.
Oh my God, I love that. My family did not have that tradition, but when I see it, I always think it's so cute.
It is. And it's so much fun to see the photos of cousins being texted. And so it's just some of the things that we so look forward to going back to school. The rest of it, not so much.
Yeah.
Now, many of the kids listening might be asking the same question, why do I have to go to school? Well, later in the show, we'll share a story that we think is a pretty good answer to that question.
Yep, stick around for that. In the meantime, mahalo for listening to the Hawai'i Radio Hour. We'll be back after this quick message.
The Hawai'i Radio Hour has been made possible with the incredibly generous kāko'o of the Richard Smart Fund.
The Richard Smart Fund supports healthcare, education, and charities in the Waimea area of Hawaii Island.
To learn more, please visit hawaiicommunityfoundation.org. Coming up later in the show, a mo'olelo from Gilian Santiago.
I tried my best to soak in every moment we spent together because I knew I would soon have to adapt to a life without her. And thanks to COVID, I was going to have an anything but normal college experience.
Aloha kākou, welcome back to Waimea and the Hawai'i Radio Hour.
It's now early August, and remembrances of the devastating fire in Lahaina 2 years ago are starting to occur.
Yeah, this week we want to bring you a story told to us by Ellen Massey, a pilot who lives here on Hawaiʻi Island. In the aftermath of the fires, it was exceptionally difficult to get needed supplies to first responders in Lahaina. The harbor was filled with destroyed vessels, and the roads, of course, were a jumble. However, there was a small airport near the town. The call went out to pilots and plane owners across the islands to begin flying relief missions into the Kapalua airport.
Ellen was a relatively inexperienced pilot at the time. She had a couple of hundred hours of flight time and had never landed at the airport just north of Lahaina. Ellen Massey told us this story from inside her hangar at the Kona airport. She took off from the Kona airport a couple days after the fires. Here's Ellen.
The tower controller's voice was calm in my headset. Winds 065 degrees at 25 knots. I ran a quick mental calculation. With winds from the east-northeast and a runway oriented almost north, that meant a 17 or 18 knot crosswind, right at the limit of what the tiny, heavily loaded airplane could handle. That meant I'd have to come in faster than normal to retain as much control as possible. I told myself to be ready to go around. This was bordering on dangerous. If it got to be too dangerous, I had to be ready to abandon the landing attempt. Out the window to my right, I could see a ragged plume of smoke where the Maui wildfires were still smoldering. Again, the tower controller's voice was calm in my headset. Winds 080 at 25, gusting 32. I turned onto final approach. 25 knots of wind and gusting to 32 knots, that was a much, much stronger crosswind. I knew it was well beyond the airplane's demonstrated crosswind component. That was the number that the manufacturer's test pilots, flying back in the 1970s, when this plane that I was flying was built, had determined that this type of little airplane could handle. Unlike weight or center of gravity, demonstrated crosswind component, the number in my head at that moment, is not an operating limitation, so there was nothing legal about preventing me from making this landing. But the laws of physics might. I would have to go around and try again. Winds like this, and inattention or poor judgment or ignorance or bad luck, have flipped over tiny airplanes like this one, have caused them to run off runways, crumpled propellers. It's not a good list. I was hardly there to become my own emergency. I was not there to divert firemen and EMTs away from the very people I was there to help. I prepared the aircraft for landing anyway, just in case. Maybe a lull in the wind would come. The gusts had bumped me around for almost the entire flight, but especially since I had passed above the gray and white ashes of Lahaina. That beautiful historic town, home to nearly 13,000 people just 3 days before this flight. Elsewhere on Maui, a few fires were still burning. Helicopter pilots I knew were dumping bucket after bucket to put them out. First responders on the ground were overwhelmed with burn victims and with searching for the missing. This August marks 2 years since the wildfires on Maui. Those fires were some of the deadliest in the last century of U.S. history, leaving 102 people dead and over 5,000 without homes. 3 days after the fires had decimated Lahaina, I took off from Kona on Big Island in a tiny Cessna loaded to its max weight with burn cream, bandages, food, and other emergency supplies. As I left, I remembered the last time I had been in Lahaina. I remembered strolling the waterfront, taking in the historic wooden buildings, the eclectic storefronts, the restaurants, bars, and ice cream parlors. Local surfers had been washing down their boards at the waterfront park, fishermen were cleaning their catch, and dive boat captains were tidying up their gear in the harbor. Lahaina's famous giant banyan tree was alive with the twittering of myna birds. Just offshore, a few sailboats rode at anchor, and off in the west, the sun was setting in a glory of gold. I remembered Lahaina as a unique and vibrant place, full of life and joy. I knew, of course, that it was gone. That was why I was making this flight. The enormity of what had happened hit me when I saw Lahaina beneath my wing, in ashes, still smoking. The terror the residents must have felt as they fled for their lives, the utter and complete devastation wrought by the fire. Out my right window, I was seeing a sight I hope never to see again, of the homes and businesses of my fellow Hawaii residents reduced to rubble. I was seeing in person something that I had only before seen on TV, a town that looked like it had been bombed. I had a physical reaction to it. My heart beat faster, my breath was shallower, there was a tightness in my chest, a blurry wetness in my eyes. I had to look away, to take a deep breath, and concentrate on what I was doing. I couldn't afford to let emotion get in the way of this mission. Flying a small plane in the winds and turbulence I was experiencing is challenging enough without losing concentration. And I was a relatively low-time pilot. I hadn't yet earned my commercial certificate, and this was by far the most demanding flying I had ever done. All the roads into Lahaina were closed and blocked at this point, and would remain that way for almost 2 weeks. So the only way people could get the provisions they needed to survive was by airlift, or by small boats landing on the beaches in the surf. The airstrip at Lahaina is privately owned and is normally off-limits to aircraft like the one I was flying. This is not necessarily a bad thing. It is perhaps the most challenging runway in the state. The instructor who first taught me to fly has described it as subject to sustained winds well over 20 knots, with low-level crossing wind shear and mountain lee-side turbulence. It is not an airstrip for cavalier or inexperienced pilots. But a small group of pilots across Hawaii had managed to obtain permission for this relief mission, and I was one of the first to take off for Lahaina. As I approached the field and contacted the tower controller, I was getting a full dose of this airport's weather hazards. The high winds that had played such an important role in the fire's ferocity had abated, but not enough. I configured the aircraft for landing, managing the power to keep a stable rate of descent. The gusts buffeted the plane, kicking its wings up and down, hitting me with updrafts and then with strong downdrafts that I had to counter with throttle. I could see a ravine snaking in front of the runway threshold. I knew that terrain feature would do weird things to the wind just as I was in the most critical phase of flight, low to the ground, at low speed, closing with the runway. I spotted the windsock to the left of the runway, standing straight out, completely full of wind, and veering this way and that in violent oscillations. "Wind check?" I asked the tower, my voice surprisingly calm. 090 at 22, gusting 29. I opened the throttle and pitched for best climb speed. That was too much, too gusty, too much crosswind. Not worth the risk. I was going around. I crabbed the airplane into the wind as I climbed, then turned west toward the shoreline and then south at 900 feet over the beach. The ocean below me was a violent mass of churning whitecaps. As I came back around for another attempt to land, I heard the tower controller again. "I think you can make it this time. Winds are backing to 050, still cleared to land, runway 2. I acknowledged his clearance, straightened out on the final approach course, and noticed that yes, I was not crabbing as aggressively to hold my course. As I neared that ravine again, I got another wind check. 060 at 26, gust 30, the controller told me. That was right at the limit, a little beyond it in the gusts. I watched the runway, keeping my landing point rock steady. That ravine kicked me up in a bit of rolling turbulence and then kicked me down, but I was ready for it. I leveled out over the runway, the nose straight along the centerline, and pulled back into the landing flare. I felt the wheels touch. The fireman came rushing out to the plane as I taxied into a parking spot, smiling with relief and congratulating me on making it. In minutes, my big load of supplies was piled onto carts and disappearing into the firehouse to be distributed among the survivors. Needing a moment to clear my head before taking off to fly home and load it up and do it again, I went into the firehouse to rest in the shade. I started talking with a couple of the firemen. One of them, very offhandedly, and in a manner belying the urgency in his eyes, said that he'd been pretty worried when I saw you come in and not land at first. That hadn't occurred to me in the moment that I'd made that decision as a pilot, that if I couldn't land, they would spend another day without critical burn cream and food. Maybe even more than seeing Lahaina, that brought home to me how important this mission really was. As we talked, I started asking if what I had brought, what people at home on Big Island were donating, was what was most needed. Pretty soon, I'd gone back to the plane to get my clipboard to write down a list of what would be most valuable. Drinking water was on that list, which was going to be a tough one for a small plane with a small payload. Water is heavy. But in the days that followed, I would fly several missions with crates of water. And I would fly first aid supplies, fresh vegetables, canned and dried foods, bedding, tents, toothpaste, soap, baby wipes, diapers, toilet paper, even Portuguese sweetbread. The group of pilots and donors I was part of on Big Island would plead with the Department of Health for 5 days before we were granted permission to fly a load of insulin. Diabetics in Lahaina were in critical condition. They had been without this life-saving medicine ever since the fires. I think that flight is the one I am most proud of, knowing that we truly saved lives that day. Over the next 2 weeks, I flew something close to 20 missions, sometimes making 3 flights a day. In that short time, I went from being a fairly new pilot in training for a commercial certificate to living the life of a cargo pilot with a packed schedule and an urgency to my flying that had never existed before. My fellow pilots from Big Island, from Oahu, and from Kahilu on Maui combined to fly many more. Together, we transported tens of thousands of pounds of donated supplies. The tour operators pitched in too, sending their helicopters and larger airplanes across the channel to Maui, full of drinking water and other equipment. People talk about the aloha spirit, and in the time I've lived in Hawaii, I have never seen it so fully embodied than in the little community of aviators putting their lives entirely on pause while they volunteered in those first days after the fires. Eventually, FEMA and other disaster relief organizations stepped in, and eventually the roads were cleared and reopened. The rebuilding process has been slow, but it is moving forward. But in those early days, it was ordinary citizens, boaters, pilots, residents organizing, donating, and loading, who rose to meet the tragedy. Our ohana came together in a way I was honored to be part of. Today, whenever I fly past Lahaina, I remember that time with both great sadness and with awe at how resilient and
Mahalo
caring
to
our
Ellen
community
for
was.
sharing her story.
We will be right back after a short break. You're listening to the Hawai'i Radio Hour from Kahilu. The Hawai'i Radio Hour is supported by the Abigail Kawananakoa Foundation.
The Abigail Kawananakoa Foundation is dedicated to preserving traditional Hawaiian culture while empowering Hawaiian people.
The foundation is the residual beneficiary of the Princess's Trust and is her lasting legacy and her ultimate gift to her people.
To learn more about the Abigail Kawananakoa Foundation, please visit kawananakoafoundation.org. Later in the show, we'll be hearing from Amy Hānaiali'i.
Ayoko kamanu oku, kamanu li'ili'i kui kawa, e o e kamanu oku, lele aku a hoi ka aina e. Ku e, ku e, ku e, ku e, hoi mai kamanu oku.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Waimea. We are grateful that you're taking time to listen to us.
If you're on the road right now, we appreciate you listening, especially if you're stuck in the lights on Kanoilehua around Puainako.
Here's a little music that we hope will make the lights change a little faster. As Kahilu gets ready to announce its upcoming season, we are looking back at some of the highlights of past seasons.
In 2023, just after the Lahaina fires, Amy Hānaiali'i opened the season at Kahilu. She's one of Hawaii's beloved musicians, and she was doing what she could to help her ohana on Maui. Here's Amy Hānaiali'i.
So you might have noticed on the posters and things that donations tonight were going to Hui of Akaulua. So mahalo, thank you. So just a little backstory on who Hui of Akaulua is. So at the entrance to Lahaina on the lower road, you have 505 Friend Street, which is burned down, which was the shops of Lahaina. Then next to it, you have Moku'ula, where Kihawahine is buried. And in the beach side of that area, where Kamehameha III, Kauikeaʻuli, signed the proclamation for the Hawaiian Kingdom, is where our property was. And I'm the president of Hui of Akaulua for my oldest brother, Timmy. He's a captain on Hokulea, but he also built our double hull canoe in Maui called Mo'okiha o Pi'ilani. So unfortunately, our haleva'a burned down. Mo'olele, which is one of the oldest canoes in Hawaii, she's one of our mama canoes, same age is Hokulea, burned down in the Haleva'a. No lives were on our property, thank goodness. And the only vessel floating in Lahaina Harbor was Mo'okia o Pi'ilani. The only one that wasn't burned. So she has a lot of black soot on her, so we took her to Molokai because there was a storm coming right after that. Now she's in dry dock in Oahu. But we have nothing at 525 Front Street now. But so what we did was we thought, hey, we have to like activate something. We have to do something for our community. So we have a hub up in Waikapu. And thank goodness my VP of my board is with the Stevedore Union. So we bring in 50 to 100 containers. We clean all of the clothes and everything coming in, organize it, package it, and then we take it out to Lahaina to service all of the hubs in Maui. There was a little bit of disconnect with the higher powers that be, so a lot of the things weren't getting to the people immediately. So we kind of jumped in and were able to service everybody. So that's what Huiava Kaulua is doing right now. So I appreciate all of your donations. Thank you so much. So this song is a song that I wrote for my brother. He was captaining Hokulea from Hawaii to Okinawa, Okinawa to Yokohama. I was traveling with Governor Linda Lingle at the time, and I wrote this song called Manu o Ku. Manu o Ku is the white-turned bird that guides our crew to land. They know when they see the Manu o Ku bird that she's going to go back to land. So she's going to be coming home soon in about a week. My brother's like, get the biggest Hawaiian flag you can find. So I found one that was like a 10 by 20, and he's going to put her right in front of Lahaina so she can be, you know, there for Lahaina. And everybody's going to be so, so happy to see her. Here we go, a song called Manu o Ku. Ka manu o ku, lele I kai ho honue, ho'i mai ka manu o ku, ho'i I ka puanana e, ku e, ku e, ku e, ku e, ho'i mai ka manu o ku. That's the manu o ku. Hele aku ka manu o ku, hele I kai I a ku e, ho'i mai ka manu o ku, ho'i mai me ka mea ai o no e, ku e, ku e, ku e, ku e, ho'i mai ka manu o ku, he manu ke o I ka ina ku e, he manu li I ka moana, ka ho ai lona no ka waa hokulea ike ana I ka moku o ka pāki pika, manu ke o I ka ina ku e, he manu li I ka moana, ka ho ai lona no ka waa hokulea ike ana I ka moku o ka pāki pika e. Ka manu li'ili I kui ka wā, e o e ka manu o ku, lele aku a hoi ka aina e. Ku e, ku e, ku e, ku e, hoi mai ka manu o ku. E manu ke o I ka aina ku e, e manu li'ili I ka moana, ka ho ai lona no ka wā hukulea I ki ana I ka moku o ka pāki pika. Manu ke o I ka aina ku e, e manu li'ili I ka moana, ka ho ai lona no ka waa hokulea I ki ana I ka moku o ka pāki pika e. That was my brother Timmy up there.
Amy Hānaiali'i will return to Kahilu later this season.
Kahilu will announce the full details of the upcoming season, including Amy's return date at an open house at the theater on August 17th. And we will be up on the stage at 3 p.m.
That's right. In the meantime, if you'd like to watch Amy Hānaiali'i's full performance, just head over to kahilu.tv. The Hawai'i Radio Hour is grateful for the Stupski Foundation's support of the Hawaii Storytellers Fellowship.
The Stupski Foundation is a private foundation returning its assets to its communities that it calls home in Hawaii and the San Francisco Bay Area.
The Stupski Foundation supports just and resilient health, food, and higher education systems. The foundation partners with community leaders who are building a more equitable future for all, because change can't wait.
We will return in a moment.
Welcome back to Hawai'i Radio Hour.
Before we move on to the mo'olelo that will close out the show for today, I wanted to talk about the big news of last week. I recorded this siren at 5:10 on Tuesday. I was down at the Kauai Harbor. Members of the canoe club were getting ready for the waves. The 6-man canoes were pushed away from Honolulu Beach and up onto higher ground. The priceless koa canoe was loaded onto a trailer and sent up Mauka. And paddlers loaded their personal 1-man canoes on top of trucks to get them out of the way. The waves were expected to be at least 3 feet and as many as 9. We watched as the barges tugged out to sea, and the boats in the harbor all headed out for deeper waters to ride out the waves. Overall, the response was calm. There was time and there were resources to get things taken care of. This was the first tsunami warning for all of Hawaii in more than a decade. After most of the canoes were secured, the legendary former coach of the club, Uncle Manny Vincent, arrived with his wife Eunice. They had driven down from Hamakua to retrieve artifacts Uncle Manny had stored in his old work shed. My son helped Uncle Manny carry things out to his truck. He wanted to save pohaku, axes, and other tools he had used to carve koa canoes. As he walked back to the truck, Uncle Manny spoke of the tsunami that had hit his hometown of Hilo in 1946. His home was in Keaukaha, near the ocean. He was a boy. There was little warning in 1946. And in 1946, the response was hampered by doubts about the warnings from Alaska. It was April Fool's Day, and could the information be trusted? Sadly, 170 people lost their lives. When we speak of ʻike kūpuna here on the show, what Uncle Manny was saying in that moment about how to react during the tsunami, that's the true knowledge. That's the true ʻike kūpuna we're interested in preserving. Those are the lessons that we need to learn. Those are the lessons that we need to share. How did our kūpuna act in situations like this in the past? We need to heed their stories. However, not enough of us have had those stories told to us firsthand. I'm so glad my son was able to hear Uncle Manny's stories. And after Uncle left, my son and I drove Mauka. We knew traffic was backing up. We were lucky, and we saw the first signs of a jam just as we were coming up to the Waiʻula Road. We turned off Kauai High and parked. We could see up and down the coastline. Others that were niele like us, curious, came out to the overlook. Slowly, rental cars from the hotels and the resorts started to appear. We chatted with friends alongside the road and talked about how we were hearing from others that things were bad in Waimea town. Traffic was snarled, and people said that there was panic buying at the grocery stores. Fortunately, most of the people and vehicles were out of the threatened areas well before the first waves were expected. My son and I listened to the radio for news from Midway, Johnston, and Hānaiali'i. However, there was nothing on the station we were listening to. We just didn't know anything more than the earlier warning to expect waves of 3 to 9 feet. Now, the locals joked that we expected the homes of the ultra-wealthy that we could see from above, that were built right up against the beaches, that they would suddenly deploy massive wave-deflecting walls, or maybe even be lifted up by hydraulic pilings. That such things can be imagined and said aloud in 2025 is a sign of how much Hawaiʻi has changed since Uncle Manny was a boy in Hilo. At the time of the expected first waves, around 7:20, there was a peaceful orange dusk. Looking down, nothing out of the ordinary was seen along the coast of South Kohala. Nothing seemed to happen. Gradually, the traffic had let up, so we drove home. Our community was spared the aftermath of a cleanup, and we are grateful for that. And because we don't have to clean up, we've been given the gift of thinking about how we can respond better the next time. And we know there will be a next time. The morning after the tsunami, CNN's Brian Stelter wrote about how the news media had reacted in Hawaiʻi after the initial alerts from Russia. The CNN media critic said that from what he'd seen and read overnight, Hawaiʻi broadcasters like Hawaii Public Radio rose to the occasion. Now, Stelter's a media writer, and he was paying attention to the mainline broadcasters here in Hawaiʻi. However, many of us don't pay attention to those news sources. In fact, my son and I were listening to Kapa Radio and Tommy Kahikina during the alerts. If we can help it, we never miss Laugh or Nor Laugh. Now, Kahikina was in the evacuation zone in Kona, so he was going to be going off the air at 4:30. But before then, Kahikina took a couple phone calls on the air. The first was from a woman complaining that the traffic in Hilo was at a standstill. She was trying to get up to her home in Mountain View. She went Bayfront, jammed. Kinaʻole, jammed. Manono, jammed. She was begging for help to get her home. The next call was troubling. It was from another woman in Hilo. She asked if it was true that they were shutting down the gas stations. Oh no, I thought. Her question was a legitimate one. But a rumor about gas stations shutting down can create more panic and chaos at a time of uncertainty. It's one of the dangers of unverified information in a crisis. Now, Kahikina never claimed to be a journalist. He did his best, I thought. He said he didn't know, and he didn't speculate. He did well in that moment. So how do we get to the point where we do know in those moments? Now, as Stelter wrote, people expect the news to come to them. And if it doesn't, they lose confidence in the news industry. He said this continues to be a structural problem. The algorithms are a whole lot better at surfacing timeless TikTok memes than verified, up-to-the-minute, hyper-local news content. We all know that that's very true. While we wish for up-to-the-moment, verified, and trusted information, there's nothing right now that really can be activated in moments like the tsunami warning. The broadcasters did okay, but there's a need to meet the audience, the citizenry of Hawaii where they're at, listening to Kapa Radio, checking their feeds on social media. Now, Hawaii isn't a news desert, but it's pretty arid, and the rise of misinformation is as present here as anywhere else. And it's not just polarizing, but dangerous in critical moments. We here at the Hawai'i Radio Hour have been on the air for 10 weeks now, and the reason why this show exists is to help train the next generation of trusted storytellers and information sharers. And as information sharers, we need to learn the lessons of this time and prepare for the next time. There will be warning fatigue if it happens again soon. I think back to what happened when my dad was growing up in Hilo. He and Uncle Manny knew each other. He narrowly escaped the tsunami in 1946. That tsunami led to the development of the warning system we benefit from today. But back to that fatigue. Now, if you've been to Hilo, you might have seen the lines for two other significant tsunamis that hit Hilo between 1946 and 1960. Neither were deadly because residents heeded the warnings. However, those lessons learned over 14 years were forgotten by many in Hilo by 1960. When the 1960 tsunami struck, my father was on the roof of the Hilo Fire Department. He had just turned 21, and he watched as the waves swept through Hilo town. Shinmachi, which had been rebuilt after earlier tsunamis, was wiped out. However, not everybody heeded the warnings. More than 60 people died, and the economic opportunities for my father's generation were wiped out. The lesson from Hilo is not having information can be deadly, and not heeding warnings can also be deadly. It's the beginning of August, and so we're thinking about the Maui wildfires. Now, this show exists in part because of what happened in Maui, and what we saw as a breakdown in communications here in Hawaii. Now, let me tell you why. I spent a lot of my career as a journalist for the New York Times covering breaking news. I filmed the second plane hit the South Tower on 9/11. I also covered the invasion of Iraq. I covered Gaza, Ukraine, and Darfur. I've spent a lot of time in difficult news environments. Finding out and sharing accurate information can be incredibly challenging. When the Maui fires happened, it took days to understand the scope of what had happened. It was a slow story to develop because there was so little information available. It took time before journalists like Chelsea Davis and Ku'uku'anoi could arrive and deliver on-the-ground reports. But that was long after more than 100 people had lost their lives. The information those people needed, those 100 people who lost their lives, was information that they needed in the moment. And that information wasn't there for them when they needed it the most. Immediately after the fires, Lieutenant Governor Sylvia Luke was honest and said that Hawaii wasn't prepared. What happened this week showed that we still have ways to go to develop a better information system here in Hawaii. One that meets the moment. As Stelter said, people expect the news to come to them, and if it doesn't, they lose confidence in the news industry. The stress of the moment can be counteracted by smart information. For instance, what was the situation with the gas stations in Hilo? What was the situations with the road? We will be under another tsunami alert, and we know that we need to be better prepared. We need to keep the lessons shared by Uncle Manny and his generation fresh in our minds. We know our citizenry needs the most basic information at times of crisis. There are places that are doing that work, but it's hard to break through the noise of the algorithms. At the Hawai'i Radio Hour, we're hoping to be part of the solution in the future. We hope that we can bring along trusted people that will become trusted sources when the time matters. We will be back in a moment. The Hawai'i Radio Hour is supported by the Abigail Kawananakoa Foundation.
The Abigail Kawananakoa Foundation is dedicated to preserving traditional Hawaiian culture while empowering Hawaiian people.
The foundation is the residual beneficiary of the Princess's Trust and is her lasting legacy and her ultimate gift to her people.
To learn more about the Abigail Kawananakoa Foundation, please visit kawananakoafoundation.org. We'll be right back. Aloha and welcome back to the show.
So here's today's last segment, a mo'olelo, a story shared in front of a live audience on stage here at Kahilu.
Since it's the first weekend in August, thoughts all around Hawaii and pretty much across the country are turning to school. Many students' first days of school are either Monday or Tuesday.
And many students out there might be wondering, why do I have to go to school? Well, we have a story that answers that question of why.
Gilian Santiago is one of our Hawaii Storytelling Fellows, and not too long ago, she was a college student. She shares her answer to that very question. Why do I have to go to school?
Here's Gilian Santiago in front of a live audience at Kahilu.
Since I was a little girl, I've always loved school and dreamt of going to college. No one in my family had been to college, and going to school has never been the ultimate goal in my family. But to me, it was everything I wanted and more. When I graduated high school in 2021, COVID-19 was still very new, and we were all still adjusting to a new way of life. I was taking classes online, and on top of that, I was figuring out how to apply to colleges all on my own. I didn't have the help of a counselor or a mentor of any kind. There was no one I could turn to help me compare different colleges, their tuition costs, the scholarships, the dorms, or academic programs. It was a stressful time for me, as it was for everyone else living through a global pandemic, but I did have my mom. My mom had always believed in me, which made me believe in myself. I ended up applying to a few colleges, some on the continent, but I also applied to Manu, just in case I decided to stay in the islands. I remember being extremely excited for college, but also hesitant because I had no idea what college life would be like during the pandemic. Would I be able to make new friends? Would I do well in my classes? The thought of moving far from home during this time of intense uncertainty didn't sit right with me, so I decided on Manoa. Regardless of where I went, I was going to be the first person in my family to be a college student, and that's something, a first-generation college student. In August of 2021, my mom helped me move to Oahu all on her own, which was interesting. My mom refuses to drive on Oahu, so that meant Uber trip after Uber trip from Ala Moana Mall to the Hale Aloha dorms. A mattress topper, dishes, groceries for the first few weeks of school, room decorations, and anything else you can think of were packed in the trunk of an Uber. After we had moved into my so-called new home, my mom and I spent a few days together exploring the streets of Waikiki, eating at places I would soon eat on my own. I tried my best to soak in every moment we spent together because I knew I would soon have to adapt to a life without her. And thanks to COVID, I was going to have an anything but normal college experience. On top of navigating my first year of college during such an unpredictable time, I would be facing it all without the comfort and security of having my mom by my side. No more home-cooked meals, no more weekends spent binge-watching our favorite TV shows, no days of just us lying on the couch talking about whatever came to mind. Now, I know many of you are thinking, isn't Oahu only a 45-minute plane ride away? And yes, you are absolutely correct, but after spending months with her and my brother in quarantine, it seemed like I was saying goodbye to everything I had ever known and hello to everything I didn't. The only thing that kept me from hopping on the plane with her back home was because I knew I had to stay strong for her, and I know she wouldn't have said no if I chose to come back with her. Even though going to college was my dream, I knew I had to do it for her. I had to do it for her because my mom had me at 18 years old, so she never got the chance to go to college, but she always supported my dream of continuing my education. Since the first grade, my mom never let me forget how capable I was, how smart I was, and how college would allow me to do all the things she didn't get to do. The first semester of college was nothing like I expected. There was basically no campus activity due to social distancing and very strict rules set in place. The dorm life was challenging as we were expected to wear our masks everywhere we went, including on the walk to the shower. If we were caught without our masks, even just outside our door, we would earn a strike. And after 3 strikes, we would be kicked out of student housing. I remember my best friend and I had been sitting outside on the benches right outside of our room. It was just us two, so our masks were sitting right below our mouths. And a resident assistant had walked by and gave us both strikes as our masks were not completely on. Things like this made me rethink my decision to have gone to college during a worldwide pandemic, but it was all just a part of the experience. Every day was a mystery, and maybe that uncertainty was what led me to change my major 3 times. I went into school as a pre-nursing major, but taking microbiome and anatomy online made me realize nursing school wasn't for me. I then switched to early childhood education, which I really enjoyed, but after 2 semesters, I came to another realization that as much as I love kids, teaching wasn't my calling. I then made my final switch to journalism 4 semesters before I would graduate. Since I was young, writing has always been something that brought me joy, and the thought of being able to make a living off of something I love to do sounded right. During those times of change, I was constantly in my head telling myself that being indecisive about my major wasn't a good sign, though I also knew committing to something I wasn't passionate about would only lead to a waste of time and money. Through every change, my mom was still there, reminding me that no matter what I decided to do, she would be proud of me. The semester before I planned to graduate, I took my capstone course, which made me rethink my switch to journalism. I remember calling my mom multiple times in tears because I didn't think I was going to pass the course. And if I didn't pass, I wouldn't graduate. Even after receiving A's and B's in every other journalism course, my professor made it almost impossible to keep going. He made me feel small and incapable of writing, which was something I had never felt before. I felt so defeated and almost ashamed. I remember calling my mom one day and telling her that I wanted to drop out. I had never thought of dropping out, and having to tell her that was even on my mind made me feel horrible. She was paying my college tuition all on her own with the help of a few scholarships, and no one wants to hear that from their kid, especially from one who's supposed to graduate in less than a year. But like my mom always does, she told me that I was more than capable. She reminded me that everything was going to be okay and that as long as I tried my best, I would succeed. So I did just that. I tried my best with what I had, and she was right. I succeeded. I passed the class with a B+, and all the stress and second-guessing myself didn't mean a thing. Looking back on my college journey, I've realized that every trial and tribulation has led me to where I am today. College is all about finding your place in this world, and I think I have found mine with the help of my mom. I don't think my mom knows this, but the only thing that kept me going for the past 3.5 years was the thought of her getting to watch me walk that line with my degree in hand. Happy Mother's Day, Mom. I love you. I'm Gilian, and I'm from Hawaiʻi.
Gilian was a storyteller here, and we plan on hearing more stories from our island home. In fact, we asked Gilian to take the stage to tell a story so she'd know what it felt like to be one of the storytellers up on stage.
And one of our favorite things about her story was she actually told it just before Mother's Day, and her mom was in the audience. Such a wonderful makana for your mama. Mahalo, Gilian.
Support for the ʻike kūpuna and mo'olelo portions of the Hawai'i Radio Hour comes from Kate Bell and Tom Blackburn of Deviants from the Norm.
Without deviation from the norm, progress is not possible.
We will return in a moment. Be sure to follow us on social media at Hawai'i Radio Hour. Look for us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook.
There you can find videos of Gilian Santiago sharing her mo'olelo. And on our YouTube channel, you can find past video of those who have shared their stories on stage.
And if you'd like to re-listen to the show, or if you'd like to share the program with ohana or friends, You can also find us by searching for the Hawai'i Radio Hour on Spotify and other podcast outlets.
Mahalo for listening. We want to thank everyone who made this show possible. Ellen Massey, Amy Hānaiali'i, and Gilian Santiago for getting in front of the microphone. Behind the scenes, of course, we want to mahalo the entire team at Kahilu. There are plenty of great events on the calendar this summer and heading into fall, so be sure to check them out at kahilu.org.
And a special mahalo to our Hawaii Storytellers Fellows, Gilian Santiago, Mehealani DuPont, and Tati Dunhauer for their help producing this week's shows.
If you're away from the islands but don't want to miss out on the performances at Kahilu, you can find those shows on Kahilu TV. In fact, you can stream Amy Hānaiali'i's past performances at Kahilu by heading to kahilu.tv.
And we are so interested in hearing from you. You can send us an email or a voice memo to aloha@hawaiiradiohour.com. Again, that's aloha@hawaiiradiohour.com.
Here on the show, we like to say, e ho'olohe I ko kākou moku. Listen to our island home.
E ho'olohe I ko kākou moku.
Ahui ho and aloha.